Hey guys, welcome back to the Crafty Boy. Today, we're building a dark fantasy miniature diorama called The Cursed Treasure. First, let's take a look at the 3D models for this build. I separated the scene into multiple parts: the mimic chest, the adventurer, and all the small props on the ground. Now it's time for 3D printing. For this project, I'm using a Resin 3D printer to capture all the fine details. The mimic chest has a lot of sharp teeth, spikes, and complex textures, so resin printing works perfectly for this kind of model. Next comes the primer. For this kind of scene, I usually go with gray primer. The gray base helps deepen the shadows and gives the whole model a heavier atmosphere. Once the primer is on, all the details become much more visible. At this stage, the project already starts coming to life. Now let's paint the main focus, the mimic chest. For the metal parts, I used a copper base color. Then added dark brown and orange rust effects. I also mixed a little black into the copper paint and used a sponge to create a worn metal texture. For the tongue, I used bright red and pink gradients. Then I applied gloss varnish on top to make it look wet and disgusting. For the teeth, I dry brushed them with an off-white color. You can get a nice result by mixing a tiny bit of yellow into white. For the eye, I added extra highlights to make it feel more alive. For the eyeball, I used a cool white tone with a little bit of blue or gray mixed in, not pure white. For the blood vessels, I used heavily thinned magenta paint. And finally, I added a tiny dot of pure black for the pupil. That small detail really makes the chest feel alive. Next, I painted the small ground props and scrap metal pieces. I started with an antique bronze metallic base coat, then used burnt umber to create rust and aging effects. Small details like these really help make the whole scene feel more realistic. Next is the adventurer figure. Since the model is very small, I focused more on strong contrast rather than ultra-fine details. First, I painted the base skin tones and brown base colors. Once that dried, I painted the clothes and backpack using brown mixed with black to create a leather effect. For the armor, I used silver metallic paint and added highlights along the edges. Finally, I added dirt and weathering to help the character blend naturally into the environment. After all the painting was finished, I sprayed a layer of matte varnish to protect the paint and remove unwanted shine. For the mimic chest, I also made 2 different versions with different border colors. Now it's time to build the ruins. I used XPS foam board for the structure because it's very easy to carve cracks and stone textures into it. After carving everything, I glued all the foam pieces together. Then I used plaster mixed with white glue to fill the seams and strengthen the structure. Once the plaster dried, I sprayed the whole ruin with dark gray primer. Next, I started painting the ruins. I used dark gray as the base color, then mixed in a little brown and green. After that, I added deeper shadows into the cracks and corners. Then, I dry brushed the entire surface with light gray to bring out all the stone textures. Finally, I applied a thin reddish-brown wash to add more age and dirt. To create an abandoned ruin feeling, After that, I used a static grass applicator to add grass around the ruins. Once all the parts were finished, it was time for final assembly. I fixed everything onto the base using UV resin glue, while continuously adjusting the composition. At this point, the whole scene finally came together. For the final step, I attached the custom nameplate, the Cursed Treasure. This small detail makes the diorama feel much more complete and gives it a proper display piece look. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy resin art and miniature diorama projects like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.